There are moments in life when a single second becomes an eternity, when everything you thought was permanent shatters in front of your eyes. That second arrived for Daniel on a gray afternoon, under a sky that seemed to foreshadow the storm about to fall upon him. He was young, full of dreams, obsessed with running. Running wasn't just a sport for him, it was freedom. His way of proving that no matter how tough life had been, he could always move faster than pain. But destiny had a cruel surprise prepared, one that would crush his body and test his soul in a way he could never have imagined. Daniel was driving home from practice, still sweaty, with his headphones on, humming the songs that fueled his energy. He was planning dinner with his family, thinking about an upcoming championship, believing that tomorrow was guaranteed. But fate does not warn. It strikes. Out of nowhere, a truck, moving at reckless speed, swerved into his lane. There was no time to react. Metal crashed against metal. Glass exploded like raindrops of fire. Screams, darkness, silence. In less than 10 seconds, Daniel's entire world collapsed. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer inside his car, but trapped in a nightmare. Pain devoured him. He looked down, and what he saw froze his heart. His legs, mangled beyond recognition, buried under twisted steel. The once unstoppable runner was now a prisoner of his own broken body. "Please, God, not my legs, not my legs," he whispered, his voice trembling, fading into the chaos of sirens approaching in the distance. The paramedics arrived, shouting commands, cutting through the wreckage, fighting against time. "Stay with us, Daniel. Stay awake." But he was drifting, his consciousness floating between life and death. In the ambulance, he caught fragments of conversations that cut through him like knives. "We might have to amputate. Too much damage. He's losing blood." Words that echoed louder than the sound of his own heartbeat. Words that painted the beginning of the darkest chapter of his life. Hours later, in the sterile cold of a hospital room, Daniel woke up. The white lights above blinded him for a second. He tried to move, but his body felt heavier than ever. Slowly, he turned his gaze, and reality struck like a dagger to the chest. His legs were gone. The bed was surrounded by silence, broken only by the soft beeping of machines. Screaming. It wasn't just a scream of pain, but of despair, rage, terror. That cry carried the weight of someone who had lost not only his limbs, but his identity, his passion, his future. The days that followed were a living hell. Daniel didn't want to see anyone. He turned his face to the wall when family and friends visited. Ashamed of being seen as broken, he refused to eat, refused to talk. He thought of himself as less than human. Why me? Why now? What's left of me without running? He repeated over and over. Nights were worse. Alone, he replayed the accident 1,000 times in his head, hearing again the screech of tires, feeling again the crushing weight of steel, reliving the exact second his life had been torn apart. Sleep brought no rest-only nightmares. Doctors and therapists tried to encourage him, telling him that many people lived fulfilling lives with prosthetics, that he could adapt, that this wasn't the end. But for Daniel, it felt like a cruel joke. They don't understand, he thought. Running was my life. Without it, I'm nothing. Each word of encouragement only deepened his anger, his feeling of being misunderstood. He started pushing everyone away, sinking deeper into loneliness. But in the depths of his pain, a single spark of light appeared. It was his mother's voice, trembling but firm, and she held his hand one night when he begged her to let him go. "Daniel, I know you think everything is over, but please, don't let this accident define you. You are more than your legs. You are my son, and I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself right now." Tears streamed down her face, but her eyes carried a strength that Daniel hadn't discerned before. It was the first time someone as faith in him pierced the darkness he had built around himself. Still, change did not come immediately. Weeks passed, full of therapy sessions where every step with crutches felt like torture. He fell. He bled. He screamed at the therapists, "Moretan, onse." He almost gave up. But there was something in that whisper of his mother's words that stayed inside him, haunting him, igniting something he didn't recognize yet. He started watching videos of other survivors online, soldiers, ordinary people who had rebuilt their lives after impossible tragedies. And for the first time, he wondered if they could. Why not me? One night, unable to sleep, Daniel stared at his reflection in the dark window. His body was different, broken, scarred, but his eyes still carried the fire of the runner he used to be. He realized that maybe his legs were gone, but his will wasn't. Maybe destiny had tried to stop him, but it had underestimated his spirit. That night, for the first time since the accident, he whispered to himself, "This is not the end. I will rise again." It wouldn't be easy. The road ahead was steep, full of physical pain, emotional breakdowns, moments where quitting seemed like the only option. But Daniel had just planted the seed of something powerful. Faith. Faith not only in God, not only in life, but in himself. And that seed would grow into the kind of strength that moves mountains, the kind of strength that turns a tragedy into a legend. Daniel woke up one morning to the sterile hum of the hospital. The sunlight fell weakly through the blinds, but inside him a storm was brewing. He had survived the accident, but survival alone was not enough. Every movement hurt. Every thought reminded him of what he had lost. Yet, deep down, a spark flickered, the first ember of determination he had felt since that tragic day. The physical therapy sessions became his battlefield. Each step with crutches was torture, each fall a reminder of his broken reality. Yet, Daniel refused to surrender completely. He started setting small goals, reach the end of the hallway without falling, lift his arms, stretch his body. Every minor victory became monumental. His therapists noticed a shift, a subtle defiance in his eyes, a silent promise that he would not let the accident define him. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Daniel sat alone in his room, exhausted, muscles screaming in pain. He gazed at his reflection in the window, seeing not a victim, but someone standing at the edge of rebirth. "I've lost my legs," he whispered to himself, voice cracking, "but they cannot take my spirit. They cannot take my will." Tears streamed down his face. But they were different. Now they were no longer only of despair. They carried a strange mix of pain and hope, the first hint of resilience beginning to bloom. His mother sat beside him quietly, her hand resting on his shoulder. "Daniel," she said softly, "you've been through hell, but you have a choice. You can let this break you, or you can rise stronger than before." He looked into her eyes and, for the first time, allowed himself to imagine a life beyond his fear. He pictured himself on a track again, in the stadium lights, feeling the wind, crossing the finish line. It seemed impossible, absurd even, but the image stayed in his mind, haunting him with possibility. Days turned into weeks. Daniel pushed himself harder. Mornings were spent in therapy. Afternoons were spent visualizing his goals, practicing balance, learning to move with prosthetics. Each time he fell, he remembered the faces of those who had survived worse. The emails and messages he had read from strangers inspired by similar stories. If they can, why can't I? He asked himself every day, whispering mantras of persistence into the mirror. The world outside Daniel's hospital room was moving forward, oblivious to his struggle. Friends posted pictures of races, vacations, celebrations. Social media was a parade of life he could not yet participate in. It would have been easy to sink, to wallow in envy and resentment. But Daniel began to understand a truth he had never considered. Real victory was not in comparing himself to others, but in reclaiming the parts of his life he thought were gone forever. Months passed. The first time he managed to stand independently with prosthetic legs, the room erupted in quiet awe. It was not a victory for the public. No cameras, no applause. Only the heavy, silent acknowledgement of a man challenging his own limitations. Daniel felt every ache, every scar, every memory of pain fused into a singular, unstoppable energy. That energy became his motor. That energy whispered every day, "You are not finished. This is only the beginning." Then came the first steps outside the hospital. The sunlight felt different, almost holy. Every crack in the pavement, every uneven step, was a reminder of the fragility of life and the resilience of the human spirit. Passers-by glanced at him, some with beat, others with admiration. Daniel didn't care. He cared about himself, about proving that tragedy could not dictate the terms of his existence. Social media began to notice his journey. Short clips of him standing, walking, exercising began to circulate. Comments flooded in. Incredible. He inspires me. I thought I had no hope, but watching him, I do. Daniel read them late at night, lying on his bed, exhausted but smiling faintly. He was becoming more than a survivor. He was becoming a symbol of resilience, a beacon for those drowning in their own struggles. The next step was unimaginable. Running again. The thought alone made him laugh and cry simultaneously. How could someone without legs dream of running? Yet Daniel refused to see limits where there were only challenges. He trained with the best prosthetics engineers, doctors, and coaches. Every sprint on the track was agony. Every stumble a lesson. Yet, the vision of crossing a finish line again, of feeling the wind, of proving to the world and to himself that he was not broken, kept him moving forward. And then, one day, it happened. Not in front of millions, not on a grand stage, but in a quiet, sunlit track. Daniel ran. Not perfectly, not gracefully, but he ran. Each step was a testament to the countless hours of pain, sweat, and persistence. His body screamed, his heart pounded like a drum of war, but his spirit sang with joy. He felt alive in a way he hadn't felt in months, in years. The accident had tried to destroy him, but it had failed spectacularly. News of his progress spread. Local media, then national coverage, then international headlines. Daniel, the young man who had lost everything in a single instant, was now being celebrated, not just for running, but for embodying the triumph of the human spirit. Interviews, speeches, motivational talks, he accepted them all, not out of vanity, but out of responsibility. His journey was no longer just his own. It belonged to anyone who had ever felt broken, anyone who had faced the impossible. Daniel's story reached millions around the world. Messages poured in from people who had been in accidents, from those battling chronic illnesses, from those struggling with mental health. They said, if he can rise from this, I can face my own battles. Daniel realized that his pain, his suffering, his tragedy had transformed into a gift that inspired, healed, and motivated. Every medal he earned, every race he completed, was more than a trophy. It was a statement, a declaration that the human spirit is more powerful than any misfortune, that faith, persistence, and resilience can rebuild what seems irreparably broken. The boy who once screamed in despair on a hospital bed had become a man who ran, not just for himself, but for everyone watching, believing, hoping. And yet, Daniel knew that the journey was ongoing. The accident had not disappeared from his mind. It remained a shadow, a reminder of fragility. But now, the shadow existed only to highlight his light. Every time he looked at his prosthetic legs, he didn't see what he had lost. He saw what he had gained: courage, endurance, inspiration, and an unshakable will to continue. The day of the championship arrived, the stadium buzzing with energy, lights shining down like stars that had descended to witness a miracle. Daniel stood at the starting line, prosthetic legs gripping the track, heart hammering with the force of every struggle he had endured. Memories flashed behind his eyes. The crash, the hospital room, the endless nights of doubt, the tears, the falls, the solitary whispers to himself, I will rise again. And now, all of it led to this moment. The gunshot echoed, piercing the air, and Daniel launched forward. Each step was a rebellion against fate, a challenge hurled at the universe that had tried to break him. Pain shot through his legs, every muscle screaming, yet his spirit surged stronger. He was no longer just running. He was soaring over the debris of his past, leaping above the shadow of despair, racing toward hope itself. The crowd's roar became a distant hum. Daniel only heard the rhythm of his heartbeat, the fire inside that refused to extinguish. Midway through the track, fatigue threatened to pull him down. He faltered, the ground seeming to rise against him, but he gritted his teeth and pushed forward, remembering his mother's voice, the strangers who had written to him saying he inspired them, the therapists who had believed in his hidden strength. Each memory became fuel, propelling him forward with a force no accident could ever destroy. "Not today," he whispered. "Not ever again." And then came the final stretch. The finish line, gleaming in the distance, seemed to stretch impossibly. But Daniel's will was unbreakable. The crowd erupted, sensing that this was more than a race, it was a triumph of the human spirit. Spectators stood, tears streaming down their faces, cameras capturing the moment that would inspire millions. Daniel's legs moved faster than ever, not just propelled by his prosthetics, but by decades of hope, struggle, and unyielding determination. As he crossed the finish line, the world held its breath. Daniel collapsed to his knees, not from exhaustion, but from the overwhelming surge of victory, pain, and redemption all at once. Tears mixed with sweat, his face reflecting every hardship he had faced. In that instant, he realized something profound. The accident had taken his legs, but it had given him something far greater, unshakable faith in himself. A testament that even in the darkest moments, the human spirit can rise, unstoppable and eternal. News of Daniel's victory spread instantly. Millions around the world watched videos of him crossing the finish line, of the raw emotion on his face, of the triumph that was not just athletic, but spiritual. People shared the story endlessly. Survivors of tragedy, those battling illness, anyone who'd ever felt broken or hopeless. Daniel became a living symbol of resilience, proof that life's most devastating moments could be transformed into milestones of inspiration. Later, in an interview, Daniel spoke softly, but with the weight of experience in every word. "I lost my legs. Yes. I lost the life I thought I had, but I never lost my will to fight, my will to believe, my faith in what is possible. This isn't just my story, it belongs to anyone who has faced darkness and thought it was the end. You can rise. You can rebuild. You can be more than what tragedy tried to make you." His words echoed, shared across continents, translated into dozens of languages, touching millions of hearts that needed exactly that spark of hope. At home, Daniel would sit with his mother, prosthetic legs resting beside him after long training sessions. They didn't need to speak. Their eyes shared the journey of pain and triumph, of nights filled with tears and mornings filled with possibility. Daniel understood that victory was not measured in medals, applause, or fame. It was measured in the courage to continue, to face fear and doubt, and to keep moving forward when every part of you says stop. Daniel's story inspired a movement. Children who had lost limbs ran alongside him in practice. Athletes with disabilities found courage to compete on global stages. Social media campaigns, motivational talks, and foundations sprang to life, all fueled by the message Daniel had lived, that no matter how broken you feel, hope, faith, and perseverance can rebuild anything. The accident had tried to erase him, but instead, it wrote a story that would endure forever. And then came a quiet moment, alone in his room, where Daniel reflected on the journey. The accident had left scars visible and invisible, but each scar was a reminder of his strength. He placed his hands on the track medal he had won, the sunlight spilling across the room, and whispered, "I survived. I rose, and if I can, anyone can." The video closes with Daniel running once more on an empty track at dawn, the world silent except for his footsteps. Each stride is a testament to perseverance, to the power of faith, and to the indomitable spirit of humanity. The camera pans upward, the sunrise painting the sky in gold, signaling the start of countless new journeys inspired by a man who refused to be defeated. In the end, Daniel's story is simple yet infinite. Tragedy may strike, bodies may break, life may test you beyond belief. But your will, your courage, and your faith can rebuild, transform, and inspire the world. Every person watching can carry that lesson. No darkness is eternal. No los final and no obstacle insurmountable if you refuse to give up. Daniel's legs may have been taken, but his spirit and the hope he ignited in millions will never be broken, and that is the greatest victory of all.